All right, this one's been a long time coming. We're just about ready to wrap up October with, I believe, the only other big DC release other than the Batman earlier this year. More on that later on in the podcast, but I'm joined by a very, very old friend who we have not had on the channel since 2020. It's another one of those old YouTube collaborations, Unyolo of Unyolo movie blogs. How have you been, man? It's good to have you back on the channel.
Thank you so much to ask me back. That old, let's just make it clear, old as in not being here a while, because everyone makes fun of my age. And it's
I
like,
don't get why they do that, man. It's so mean. It's like there is no age limits when it comes to this YouTube stuff that we do, you know?
yeah, it's probably just there isn't a lot of people my age doing this, but I don't care. I have fun. What matters is what's inside, and inside, I'm still a kid enjoying movies. And that's what you have to do to watch a movie like Black Adam, but we'll talk about that.
Those no truer words have ever been spoken, especially about a movie like that. So we will get back to all of you guys and more with our review of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's long-awaited Black Adam. Stay tuned. Oh man. Oh man. Oh man. Oh man. Do we have a lot to talk about here? What's up, guys? And of course, Dom, the movie nerd of Talking TV. I am joined once again by my good friend Unyolo of Unyolo Movie Blogs. It's been a while since we've had him on the channel, but I asked him last night, and we were both very excited to talk about what is surprisingly enough the latest movie from a studio that feels like it has been occupying so much of the internet space for the last couple of years. And this year has just been, I don't know. It's kind of been on the back burner, because it feels like there was those year after year after year where it's just like, oh my God, what's DC up to? Oh my God, what's DC up to? Ever since the whole Batman versus Superman, Snyder, Justice League, Snyder Cut debacle that finally seems to have resolved itself last year, DC and obviously its parent company, Time Warner Brothers has gone through a lot of behind the scenes changes. They were at first bought by AT&T, then AT&T recently sold them off to Discovery. There was a new CEO in place. A bunch of stuff that was set to come out has been canceled. A bunch of stuff has been reworked. All of that kind of stuff has been going on behind the scenes. But what's so interesting about that is it feels like this is the first time in a while where things have just been like quiet, and I think the reason why is because DC's prime competitor, Marvel, has just been getting all of the attention lately just because of the inherent quality of their stuff. So, Yolo, in order to kick this conversation up, before we actually get into the movie of itself, like, have you been keeping track of all the behind the scenes stuff with the DC universe? Have you been like aware of everything that's been going on?
Yeah, I think for us, this is like usually the problem with people like us that love cinema and know everything about it. For us, I think it's impossible not to know everything that's going on. But to be honest, like if you talk to it like the general public and you talk about people that usually go to movies, they probably have no idea what's going on. They probably have no idea Batgirl movie was coming and it was canceled. That is something that's very into the community that we're part of. So yeah, I've been keeping track, and I think what's been going on, like you said, because Marvel gets all the attention, I think people kind of quit on DC. This is good for them because there's no expectations going into their movies now. People are just going in and thinking, Jesus, let's just hope this is not as bad as that one. And I think that's like what's been going on lately, and this movie is a perfect example. So yeah, I've been keeping track of everything. It's nuts, like from the point of view of a creator having a movie that's almost finished or finished and then it's not going to be released. So it's impossible not to know those news if you love cinema. But for general public, I think it's very under the wraps and no one really cares about it.
No, it's so interesting because again, like it feels like the story of the last 5 to 6 years has been, DC movie comes out. Oh no, something doesn't work about it. Okay, what happened behind the scenes? okay, here's the story of what happened behind the scenes. And I feel like that's been the running track record for every single one of these movies. It's like Batman versus Superman. Oh no, there was supposed to be a longer 3-hour cut. The first Suicide Squad movie. Oh no, the movie was ripped out from David Ayer's hands and sent to the trailer company. Then Wonder Woman, that was a little bit of a success. Then the whole debacle with Justice League. When it's like there was just a certain point where it just felt like they couldn't catch a break. Then there was the whole AT&T thing. And also with during COVID with the day and date drop, where obviously, they were releasing all their movies simultaneously on HBO Max that we talked about last year. And that obviously was hugely detrimental to them in hindsight. They ended up losing a ton of money on that. So then AT&T ended up selling them off to Discovery. HBO Max is now being discussed to merge with Discovery in order to form one big streaming service. They got a new CEO in place. And again, it's just like the cuts were happening, and it felt like that was what all the focus was on, to a point where it almost like, again, like the movies, it felt like kind of took a backdrop, which I think is ironic, because I would argue that this is probably the most consistent stretch of movies that DC has had, where after, I would argue, the two like kind of bomb drops that they kind of just, one which was set to be a focus release at the beginning of 2020, the other which was the first of the day and date drops at the end of 2020 leading into 2021, those movies, of course, being Birds of Prey and Wonder Woman 1984, which for the most part, those movies were both pretty negatively received. I'd argue that since August of 2021, with the release of James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, I'd argue that DC has never seen better days or better quality. The Suicide Squad, for the most part, was all but critically beloved. The Batman got amazing reviews when that came out. James Gunn's follow-up Peacemaker was also dropping on HBO Max at the time. Their shows that have been on right now, Titans and Doom Patrol, are both getting extremely positive reviews. I would argue that DC was on an uptick. So in a way, this was kind of the perfect time to release this movie. Famously DC, because of all the behind-the-scenes money issues that they've been having. Like I said, they completely scrapped Batgirl, all the problems with Ezra Miller, both Aquaman, The Lost Kingdom, and Shazam, Fury of the Gods, the sequels to Aquaman and Shazam, were both pushed into next year. The Flash is still set to come out in summer of next year, even with all the Ezra Miller problems. They even went out of their way to say, okay, they could only release this movie now because they apparently only had enough money to release one more big superhero movie for the year. Don't know how much that I believe, just of course, when it comes to superheroes, just when it comes to corporations saying, oh, we don't have enough money to do that. It's like, okay, again, from the common ground that we're speaking on here, this platform, it's like, I do find that a little bit hard to believe. But the point being is that this was kind of a situation of where we're kind of putting all of our eggs into this basket in order to see if this franchise indeed still does have legs. Like I said, the Suicide Squad, kind of got to take that with a grain of salt. It was a box office bomb. But again, I attribute that to a majority of the day and date drop thing, because a lot of those movies that came out last year just did not do that well. I think the only exceptions to that were Dune, Godzilla vs. Kong, and Mortal Kombat. It's called. And the Batman, I gotta recheck, because even though it felt like that movie kind of came and went because of how close the HBO Max release was to its theatrical release, that movie did still do very well, and it was very, very positively received.
Yeah, it did around 800 million worldwide.
Yeah, so that movie was a success overall, I would say. The biggest thing, again, is just that, like, we really haven't had any DC content since the Batman, which was in March. So that makes that, like 6-7 months ago, which by internet time feels like a year ago. It really does. Yeah. So here we have Black Adam. And what's so interesting is that this is like the first DC movie in a while that feels like the behind the scenes, like they did do a little bit of their usual nonsense of the behind the scenes of promoting it. They're like, okay, we had to do a couple of reshoots around this movie, because obviously this movie has another big presence to it, another big thing to it. Besides the whole DC rigmarole of it all. And that's, of course, The Rock. The Rock famously, the kind of other side of the coin for this movie, as well as the fact that The Rock has apparently been set to play this character of Black Adam for 15 years, which is something that I was unaware of. I thought this was a thing of where, okay, when they were announcing their slate of movies that they were going to do, when it felt like they were doing what most studios do, which is, okay, we're just going to throw a dartboard at a dartboard of characters and that whichever one hits next, that's the one that we're going to make a movie about. And and so I thought that was just, the next on the slate. I'm like, okay, I knew they were doing Shazam. Okay, that makes sense to do Black Adam. Black Adam's a big enough character. He'd be able to get his own movie. The Rock, I'm like, okay, that seems like good casting overall. But apparently The Rock has been set to play this part since the early 2000s, since apparently the days of the Christopher Nolan movies. So I found that a little bit interesting. And I'll say this, man, God bless The Rock as far as being the best solo promoter for anything in Hollywood, because he has been going out of his way to be like, okay, you guys have got to see this movie because I am basically single-handedly saving the DCU. We're bringing back some form of continuity. We're not going to do all these spin-offs now. We're not going to do all this crazy multiverse stuff. We're going to focus it. We're going to bring it back to these set of characters that you are at the very least familiar with, and then we're going to go from there. So before we get in, I just wanted to get your take on that as far as like, The Rock and how he like is kind of trying to make himself out to be like the savior of these upcoming stretch of DC movies.
Yeah, look, this is what I think DC needs. DC needs people that first understand the characters that they have, and second, that they really love the characters. And this of The Rock, he says 15 years. I would say probably 20 since the first time I heard him talking about how much he loves Black Adam and how he's a fan and he would love to play him. So this is what we need because, like, when we're talking about all these problems DC is having against Marvel, this is not something new and people need to study their history to learn with it. This is something that happened with the comic books years and years ago. When Marvel showed up, DC was the big boy in town. Marvel started doing more grounded superheroes. They started doing heroes that exist in cities that everyone knows, like New York and stuff. And everything of DC was just too big. It's like it's boring to watch like a superhero movie when the guy can't be defeated. And you watch that with Shazam, unless he says the words and he gives up the movie, it can't be defeated. The same with Superman, the same with most of the DC superheroes. And I think that's what we need is people that understand what is the big difference between the characters in DC and the characters in Marvel. There's a reason that Batman is so famous because he's probably the most Marvel kind of character that exists on DC. He's just like a normal guy that just trains and becomes a superhero. All the other ones are just like you just can't connect. So I think DC needs to understand the characters they have. They need to go and find people that really, really love these characters, that have a connection, that it's not like, oh, we have this movie that we decided to go and make with these actors, and this is the story, and now let's get a director to do it. No, we need to get like a James Gunn that starts from the scratch, and that movie was the box office flop, but it's probably one of the best DC movies out there in a very, very long time. And it didn't work. And I think in a big reason for not working, it's not just being released at the same time, but it's that people just came from a bunch of bad movies of DC and they just thought, I'll watch this at home because if I go to the cinema, I'm going to pay loads of money. I'm going to get upset in the end because then you saw it like with Batman, it started getting a little bit better. And there was a lot of movies that people went and see in the cinema. So I don't think it's just the release. It's just people didn't have trust. And I think what The Rock brings is exactly that. There's no more confident guy in the world. And there's not a guy that he's not just going to let things be. He's not just going to do his Black Adam movies and not care what DC is doing about everything else around it. He's going to be calling everyone. He's going to be on top of everyone. And he's going to want to have a big saying in everything. And because he's The Rock and DC at the moment and Warner Brothers needs people like this in their back, they're going to give him some leeway to try and mold it. And I think that is the thing. I don't know about the all connected thing. I don't know if that works because we already had that in Marvel a little bit when we got Captain Marvel. When we got Captain Marvel, every time something happens, everyone goes and say, "Oh, where's Captain Marvel? Why doesn't she just shows up and saves it?" If we have a connected universe in the DC, we'll have the same problem with Superman. We'll have the same problem with Shazam. We'll just be thinking, why aren't these people showing up when the world is in? So I don't know. I like the small projects that they do. I like them doing stuff like, for example, they did with the Joker, something completely different. I think they shouldn't put all their eggs in one basket of trying connected everything. I think Marvel is watching that now also, what they did, Werewolf by Night. They saw that they can just create a small story that is not connected to everything else, and people will still dig it. And I think that's something they're seeing now and doing more. So I think they shouldn't put everything in the same basket, but for at least for this connected thing, The Rock, I think he was right. I think he's the kind of energy that we needed, and I think he's very smart. He knows what movies he's in. He knows how serious the movies are, and he takes himself how serious the movies are. And if it's silly, he goes silly, and we kind of connect. If it's a little bit more serious, he can go a little bit more serious. So I think we need someone like that that understands like the public and the fans, and I just hope this CEO, the new CEO, also understands that he needs to get people behind these movies that really, really are fans going forward.
Yeah, and that's been the big message that he's been saying in all of the promotion. Again, he has been using very, very specific keywords because you're 100% right. There's nobody that knows how to advertise and nobody knows how to get people on board with something better than The Rock. Like, say what you will about the
He's
last
the
couple of
Ryan
years.
Reynolds. He's the Ryan
Exactly.
Reynolds of DC.
He's the Ryan Reynolds. That no true words have ever been spoken. That's so accurate. It's kind of crazy. Where he has very specifically been using you, the fans. We hear you, and we are trying to appreciate you because that I feel like has been the biggest difference constantly between the fan base over the last couple of years. Marvel fans feel like they've been getting everything that they've wanted from the comics, and DC fans feel like they've been getting nothing from the comics. Right? Again, there was the whole Zack Snyder movement, which I feel like again for the Snyder fanboys that was huge, and for everybody else, it just felt like it was exhausting. And then it felt like every single other thing that we were getting outside of the Snyder thing was just disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. And now that we finally got the Snyder cut, we finally moved away from it. Snyder has moved on from that whole thing. We're past that whole phase, that whole era. Now they're like, okay, we are trying to move on, at least for the time being. We are trying to give you guys something new. Here is this something new, And what's interesting too is how, again, so they went back and did reshoots, obviously, like they do with every single thing. But it feels like every time that people talked about reshoots for a DC movie, it was always in the negative. And this is for the first time that they've talked about it from a positive light because, again, they went back and did reshoots in order to bring in Viola Davis as Amanda Waller and then Jennifer Holland's Amelia Harcourt character who appeared in the Suicide Squad Peacemaker in order to try and make it seem more connected overall. You have the Justice Society of America in this movie. We'll talk about them in a little bit. But overall, I can definitely say that as far as them trying to make steps in order to push this in the right direction, I definitely think they're going in that direction. Now, as far as the movie itself goes, so this movie, I think that what's also interesting here too is that they marketed this very differently than any of the previous DC movies, which I like. Like all the marketing for the DC movies, regardless of whether it works or not, has always been interesting. And what I like is how the last couple of movies that we've been getting, they've all felt distinctly different. Like James Gunn promised that we were going to get a man on a mission, like Dirty Dozen, Bad Batch-esque kind of on the ground war movie similar to Inglourious Basterds with the Suicide Squad, and we got that. Matt Reeves promised that we were going to get a David Fincher-esque murder mystery thriller with the Batman, and we got that. For that's another thing that's been helping with this track record too is we've actually been getting what the filmmakers and the creators have promised that we're getting, and with this movie, I can definitely say this is exactly what was promised, which is a no-holds-barred action wrestling-esque beat-em-up about somebody who essentially has the powers of Superman, only powered by magic, unleashed into the modern world and having to understand, the new threat that is taking over his home country, while also not exactly being the, what's it called? Possibly the hero that the city needs, only because, again, traditionally, Black Adam is one of those characters. What's so fascinating about him, and this also ties into The Rock as well, is Black Adam has not traditionally been a hero. He started off as a villain that then transitioned into an anti-hero. And so I would argue that The Rock, who it feels like has been so dead set and adamant on playing good characters for the last 10 years of his career since he really, really broke out with the Fast and Furious movies, this is the first, like, kind of, again, in order to bring back that wrestling terminology that we love dropping on this show, the first heel turn that he has ever gone. This movie's directed by Juan Sarah, who has been known for directing some pretty good action movies over the last couple of years. Some of his movies include House of Wax, Orphan, The Shallows, Unknown with Liam Neeson, Nonstop, Run All Night, The Commuter. He also directed last year's Jungle Cruise with The Rock. So this definitely is a guy who knows what he's doing. This is a guy who's been working in big budget Hollywood studios for a long time. And I can say right off the bat that as far as the reason to watch this movie in theaters, number one I can say is the action, because the action sequences, these are some of the best action sequences that I've seen in DC in a long time. The visuals, I think for once they actually get the visuals just right, where they're not too cartoony looking, but they're not too realistic and down to the earth, so it actually works out. I would say kind of the allusions to the modern day world as far as, the origins of Kandak. A little bit of historical discrepancy needs to be taken there, but I think that was all there for the most part. So as far as this just being like a good, entertaining movie that you could go to the theaters and have an absolute blast with, I'd say so far 2 check marks on those boxes. They definitely got those 2 things right.
No, absolutely. And I heard about that they had to go to get the age rating down a couple of times because it was considered R in the beginning. And I could actually see that because there's a scene in the beginning where he electrocutes this guy and we kind of get a skeleton in his hands that I thought, well, how did they pull this out? Because it is quite a bit much. And some of the action scenes are, like you said, very wrestling like. So I think they really understood what this character needs. Yeah, it is a bit different from the comic books. Like you said, he starts as a pure villain, is an anti-hero, but never as good as he is here. But I'm fine with it. Like, look, as long as you make it work in the movies, I'm a big comic book fan, but I'm not that kind of comic book fan that's like, oh, they changed that. There's a lot of things that needs to change for it to like to go into a movie and work. And if you wanted to do a movie about Black Adam, you had to make him kind of an anti-hero. You can't have him a full-on villain because then in the end it doesn't really work. So I think they really understood. And The Rock, his willingness of being a bad guy here, also I think he comes from that because in the end, and I think that's what The Rock really matters is he doing this for the right reasons? He might not do it perfectly. He might be a bit flawed, but is he doing it for the right reasons? And in the end, there is that big connection with being a parent. We see him how important that is and how that changes him in the movie. I think that twist was not well done because I think everyone understood what was going on there, but still, it was a big important part in the movie, and I think that's also what got The Rock excited about it. This is just about a dad that is trying to get revenge in some way, and he loses his way. But I think that's it. They understood what this character was, and they understood what they could do with it. And they got a director that already had a connection with The Rock because they did the Jungle Cruise. So it was someone that probably The Rock talked with him a lot before this guy got into the project. And he understood that this director kind of had the same vision. And I think that's like the main point they have to take out of this movie. I think they don't have to try and reproduce, because if they try and replicate this movie again and again with other characters, it's going to be a flop. Because
Yes.
this one works because of the character, because of The Rock, because of everything around it. If you go now and try and do an Aquaman and try and do whatever in the same molds, is not going to work. And I think that's the big thing they need to take out of it. It's not the movie that comes out, but it's the connection and the energy of the team and the people involved that they need to try and reproduce.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. And for the most part, it seems like that's what we're getting as well with Shazam 2, with Aquaman 2, when those both come out next year. The Flash still notwithstanding, but we all know that movie's been in development hell for a lot of different reasons as well, because I feel like the other big problem with DC, in addition to their behind the scenes production with the studios that control them, is, again, just the stars that they've had to control. Again, just DC has just had a long running track record of problematic stars, from Jared Leto to now Amber Heard to obviously to Ezra Miller. It's like they just can't keep their stars on track. The Rock, however, it definitely does not have that issue per se. So we should probably break down the plot of this movie and what it's actually about. So the Rock obviously portrays the character of Teth Adam, also known as Black Adam. The biggest thing about him is that he hails from the kingdom of Kandak, which, according to DC lore, is apparently older than Babylon. I thought that was a little bit problematic, because I'm like, okay, we've all done sixth grade history. We know that Babylon is the oldest civilization in the world, that spawns from ancient Mesopotamia. So already I just thought that was funny there. Basically, the whole thing is that, at least the story that we are told, is that in order to stop the tyrannical king at the time, Akton, from creating the crown of Sabak from this mineral that he had the entire civilization mining for, what's it called? A young slave boy was given the powers of Shazam, the same powers, obviously, that we saw Billy Batson get in the 2019 movie Shazam by the Ancient Council of Wizards, which transforms him into Kandak's champion. But he allegedly killed Acton, ended his reign, and then was apparently banished by the Council of Wizards and buried for thousands of years. What's it called? Until he is reawoken in the modern day when when an archaeologist attempts to awake him in order to help have him stop Intergang, who has taken over their country, and he reawakens in the modern day only to come into conflict with the newly assembled Justice Society, which is a super team of heroes that has never been previously established in the current canon of DCEU. They exist in the DC Comics as an earlier iteration of the Justice League, which they usually consist of, along with the characters that we see here, Atom Smasher, Hawkman, Dr. Fate. They also have on their roster two of the earliest versions of the Flash and Green Lantern characters, that of course being Jay Garrick and Alan Scott. Those characters are not seen here at all. And of course, they come into conflict as Teth Adam has to learn whether or not he's trying to be a hero or a villain overall. And I can say right off the bat that as far as the whole establishing that this version of Black Adam is not necessarily the same version that we're used to. Because I remember Black Adam when I was a kid. Like, I remember growing up, Black Adam was one of those guys between the cartoon shows that I watched and some of the video games that I watched. I remember the DC Injustice. Black Adam, I always knew was just a straight up villain, I learned about the Shazam origin story and how Black Adam was kind of his enemy, and then as time went on, how, he ended up fighting Superman as well. More on that in a little bit. What's it called? So to me, Black Adam was always a villain, So when I heard that The Rock was going to be playing him, I'm like, at first I was like, okay, this is interesting. The Rock hasn't played a villain in a while. The Rock has kind of gone out of his way to not play a villain necessarily. Now it's like, okay, this is going to be an anti-hero thing, because I'm like, cause this is what they do now with a couple of their villains. You saw this with Loki on Marvel. I feel like it's the biggest example. There's a couple of other ones that
Venom. I think Venom is also
Venom as
a
well.
great example.
I agree with that. Yeah, somebody who started off as a straight-up villain, but then transitioned into more of an anti-hero role. And Black Adam is definitely one of those guys. And I can say right off the bat that I definitely think that they did a good job of immediately establishing, because it's like, okay, this guy is not a bad guy. This guy, again, for lack of a better word, he's almost like DC's version of the Punisher, if you will, where he plays down and dirty, and he's not somebody that's going to let bad guys walk away, but he's also not going to hurt or harm innocents, especially once you realize, he has this big thing of like having to, he's got a little bit of the Captain America thing going on where he's like, okay, I've been asleep for thousands of years. This is not the same country that I knew, but these are still my people. I do still, have some form of, I do still feel some responsibility for them, And I think that aspect, is translated really well. I think his kind of struggle is translated really well. Again, it's just like, it's a big, fun, dumb action movie, but like all this basic stuff that we need for this character stuff, it's there. It's all there, and I think it's set up really well. And even though I question some of the acting choices that the cast members for the Justice Society made, we'll get into that in a little bit. I am also like, okay, as far as presenting these kind of like shining gold standards of heroes, and I say that in air quotes, in order to provide the necessary conflict that Black Adam needs in this new world, I think that they handle it well. This whole thing of, it's like, the idea of, okay, you can't kill bad guys for a lot of the different reasons that are presented. And again, some of the humorous moments don't necessarily work out. Some of them I think are pretty funny, as far as the whole treatment of Intergang. And then once we get into the third act with who the main villain is, which a little bit of a generic main villain, I will say, but it works for the purposes of the movie as far as just like providing a big bad that they need to smack at the end of the movie. I think it works, and I think they do their homework as far as setting up, okay, this is the conflict, this is what needs to happen, and this is how it's going to get resolved. It's like basic storytelling. Who knew? It works when you actually apply it. Crazy stuff.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think sometimes people overcomplicate what people want. People are stressed. People need a release. People need to go to the cinema and to be fun. Look, all of us that are into movies, we love going to the movies and coming out destructive and like crying, and our lives is not the same because we just saw that drama that killed us. But most people don't want that. Most people want to go in, they want to see like a stupid popcorn movie, they want to laugh, they want to see some cool action, and then they want to leave the cinema, go home, and forget all about it. And this is the perfect movie to do that. It just goes there. It's very simple. Yes, like you said, it hits all the lines, so you care enough. I think The Rock, I'm not always a huge fan of his performances. I think here he mixes exactly the right amount of the comedy, the little bit of that fish out of water that he doesn't really know, that funny thing with his punchline that he tries and makes it to the bad guys. It's funny. It just kind of mixes everything, and then it's just like this is probably the first time in that we had to have like CGI to make an actor look smaller, because The Rock doesn't need the CGI to look like the Black Adam. So it was hilarious when they had to make him look smaller. It just looked weird, that little head there.
It was a little
But
bit like Steve Rogers from like the first
yeah,
Captain
it was.
America movie where they had the CG shrink him down.
But the thing is, like with Chris Evans, we never saw Chris Evans big until the Captain America.
Right.
So how we remember Chris Evans, like he was always a bit skinny, so it didn't look as weird. When we see The Rock going skinny, it is a bit weird. But so he perfectly fits everything there. And I thought for most of the cast, it worked really well for the most of the cast. I think there's a few cast members there that I just think they needed to up the numbers. I think the
sure.
Justice League, Justice Society couldn't just be two guys, because it's mainly two guys in the story, but it would be a little bit weird if it was just two guys going around. So they kind of add another ones, and they're not always like, if you think about it and you remove those two extra characters from the movie, how did they really affected the movie?
Right, you lose
they
nothing
didn't.
other than Adam Smasher just kind of being a goof and Cyclone just being like a generic nerd that just knows everything.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like their exposition dumper. And as well about that, like, I will say that, like, again, I try not to focus on this hard, but like the parts with the Justice Society, those were kind of the most glaringly obvious reshoots where they're just trying to shoehorn Amanda Waller into that storyline in order to make it seem like there's some sense of continuity, because it's like, when did Amanda Waller ever set this up previously? You know, we can assume that the Justice League is still a thing in this universe, even though we haven't seen them since the 2017 movie, which, again, unfortunately, for lack of a better word, despite the Snyder Cut existing, the Justice League 2017 shitbox that we got is apparently still the one that's canon. And so we have this team, the Justice Society, but they've never been previously established. They're just kind of there and just thrown into the movie. And it's like, okay, there's all these heroes that come from this big legacy. They operate out of a mansion with a jet that may as well just be the X jet and X mansion. I literally saw the shot in the movie and I'm like, okay, come on, guys. Like, what are we doing here? We're still shamelessly doing this. And the cast as well, where it's like they're kind of just relying on voiceover and exposition dump in order to kind of just throw these heroes into us. And again, if this was the first movie that we were getting in this universe, okay, I'd be more fine with it. But it's like we are coming off of some sense of continuity, and since it feels like they're going so out of their way in order to like establish that it's like, okay, we're trying to bring back some of the old continuity. You know, they go out of their way to establish that there's this kid character who's kind of like the Rock's muse in the movie. They're kind of trying to do the whole Iron Giant thing, where it's like, you know, the kid that bonds with the sleeping giant, for lack of a better word. And, you know, this kid is established to be a massive, massive comic book fan. You know, he's got like DC iconography all over his room, you know, in order to try and establish that, like, okay, this is the first time in a while where they're trying to go out of their way and say, hey, this movie is attached to a greater overall universe. And then you just have these guys that just kind of come in out of nowhere. And it's like, okay, so we've been expected to believe that throughout this entire time, all these movies we said that characters like Hawkman and Dr. Fate, who've got these massively established lores and canons, have just been sitting around in this universe, dicking around. But I will say, though, to that credit, I heard a lot of, you know, compliments going towards Pierce Brosnan's performance as Dr. Fate, and I can confidently say that he was probably my second favorite part in the movie, other than The Rock, because all the time The Rock is getting into, you know, his pissing contest with Hawkman throughout the entire time, you know, with Aldous Hodge. Well, I'll get into him in a little bit. And Pierce Brosnan is kind of just sitting back, just like almost munching on popcorn, watching it, where they're kind of taking the whole Doctor Strange thing of being able to see the future and time simultaneously and just enjoying it and watching like a TV show. I thought that was actually kind of funny, you know, and I thought that was like one of the other parts of the movie that really, really worked.
For me, it doesn't bother me, like, because look, this is what I was saying. If we start getting very into our heads and trying to think this logically, and why didn't these characters show up before? Because it's like, look, we have a guy that throws lightning out of his hands. We have a guy with a helmet that flies around, sees the future. If we start getting too much into the logic of things, everything starts crumbling. And that's the same with Marvel. Look, this guy is like, I think what they're trying to set up is that Amanda Waller, she kind of has a lot of teams in her pocket. And when she needs to use certain teams, if it's something that's like criminal, she gets the Suicide Squad. If it's something that is like a world kind of like threat. She gets the Justice League, like we saw in the after credits, but we'll talk about that later. But then she just has all these people that she kind of taps in and she gets them together. And the thing that we didn't saw these characters, that can be said by like any other characters that we put forward, because any characters that show up in the future, we can say, okay, so why didn't this guy show up before? So that didn't really bother me that much. But I completely agree with you. I think Pierce Brosnan, like, he kind of added a layer to the movie, a layer of someone that kind of understands that you can't always judge a book for the cover. Like, he knows that Black Adam might see himself as like a villain, but in the end, he knows that there's something there, and he kind of tries to not get in the middle because he kind of knows how things are going to end up. And I think Pierce Brosnan played this really well. And also, like, I think Aldis Hodge is like is another character that I really enjoy. I was really surprised finding out he's 36 only, because
Yeah.
I remember. I don't know if you ever saw a TV show called Leverage.
Yeah, Leverage. I watched that all the time with my parents when I was a kid, and I remember
It
seeing
was
him.
like
I will
one
always
of
remember
my.
him from that show.
But the thing is, that show for me was years and years and years and years
Yeah, it went
ago.
on a long time. That show went on for like 8 years, I think, and it got a spinoff.
Yeah, and so my thing was like, how is this guy 36? How old was he? Because he looks exactly the same that it looks on. It just looks more built up, but he looks exactly the same. So I was really like, I really like him as an actor. I think he's really funny, and I think here, like, he also was able to kind of play against Rock, and that's not easy. We saw some of the best trying to do it, and sometimes they fail. Apart from Ryan Reynolds, I think there's not a lot of people that can go against The Rock and get that comedy and get that like kind of tough guy at the same time. And I think he did a great job here. But yeah, I think like what they build up around it, I think it can be developed now more, so we can see a little bit more where this guy's has been. But I completely agree with you, that thing of the plane coming out of the pool or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like they used something from the X-Men that
It's
wasn't
almost
used.
like, you know what it is? It's
They
almost like
ran out of budget and they just asked, "Look, can we use that? Like, we just
it's
painted it a
literally,
little bit little."
you know what it is? It's so much like, because we saw all those scenes from Deadpool where Deadpool was almost shamelessly like, yeah, we still have these CG stills of the jet rising out of the
Yeah,
pool. We're just gonna use that in this movie, and it's almost like DC literally just ripped that exactly, and is like, oh yeah, we still, with those CG stills, they still work every time. Can we use that? Because I literally saw that. I'm like, okay, come on, guys. I've been watching this shit for 22 years now. I'm like, I watched the original X-Men movie. I know that what's it called? I know I can see that this is rising out of the pool. And Derpy Gaming has been commenting here, and I just wanted to give him a shout out at all because he's clamoring to be noticed here. So as a DC fan, I'm not watching this film because it's the same crap as always with Warner Brothers. They don't care about the character; they just want that cash grab. Well, we can officially say this is the first time that they are proving us wrong, because this does not feel like just another cash grab. And if we're going to use that terminology again, just be aware that for these studios, all of these characters and all of these IP are cash grabs. It's, if we're going to use that terminology, at this point,
I think that's something that people forget. Look,
yeah,
if they don't make money, they can't make movies. If they can't make movies, we don't have movies to see and complain about. This is the thing. Like, people fail to understand that there is a lot of companies that did movies and they went bankrupt. Okay. Like, I was seeing the other day on TV, Cutthroat Island. I don't know if you remember
yep.
that movie with Gina Davis.
I remember Cutthroat Island. I'm not.
Okay, that is the reason that movie is the single reason that a company like Orion, that did Terminator and did like some iconic movies, went out of business. Okay, one movie was enough to break them, and this is what people don't understand. These movies cost like 200 million to make.
Exactly.
They need to make money.
especially because they don't make mid-budget level movies anymore. It would see what used to happen is that studios would, for the most part, put out like one or two of these movies that would cost like between 200 and 300 million a year, and the rest of their movies we would get specifically from Warner Brothers. This is what made Warner Brothers for so many years. Again, they would make a lot of mid-budget level adult movies, 20 to 30 million dollar movies. That would, again, you'd be your mystery thrillers, all your genre movies, your Oscar movies. And now, because people stopped watching those types of movies in theaters because all those movies just went directly to streaming, now these are the only types of movies that we get in theaters. We only get the 200 to 300 million dollar giant spectacle fair rides in theaters. And again, it's the whole thing of, because we get so many of them now a year from so many studios, and also because we just are still coming out of a pandemic, people are still getting used to going to see these movies in theaters. So these, and not to mention the fact that, again, China, which was a large part of the reason why these movies were always so successful, is now not playing these movies primarily. Now these movies are struggling even harder to make their money back. So, and understand that if these movies do not make money, we do not get more of them, because this is how this works. So if we want
and more.
Exactly.
And more like, for example, the other day I went to the cinema to watch Triangle of Sadness. I don't know if you saw it already.
I did. I finished it the other night.
And I was the only person in the cinema. I was alone, just me watching this movie.
The only
reason this movie is in the cinema is because they have movies like Black Adam filling up the rooms on the side of it. And because they get some free theater-like rooms, they can put other movies in. Because if we don't get movies like this, the cinemas will go out of business, and we will not have any kind of movie. So I think people need to be a little bit more appreciative of these movies. Like, people put shit on like Fast and the Furious. Look, I'm not a fan of saying they like the biggest movies, the best movies. But they are the movies that people go and see, and allows for a movie like Triangle of Sadness to get a screening somewhere, because there's a space there that they need to fill. So, like, when people say that, I think they don't really understand the business that's coming out of the movie theaters and the movie industry.
Right. Not to mention the fact that, trust me, regardless of whether or not Kevin Feige and Disney do actually buy DC, which will never happen, because then we would have a monopoly on our hands, because DC would go from control. Well, I'm not, you know what? You're right. I should say that. Like, we will get regardless, we will get a Marvel DC movie, Marvel versus DC movie at some point. But just look at what's going on in Marvel right now. Almost everything we've gotten in the last year is sucked from them. They are spread way too thin and putting out way too many projects overall. Honestly, I'm saying, like, keep it with DC, because if they just keep it with the track record they're going right now, honestly, we could get some pretty positive things overall. Now, as far as you were talking about Aldous Hodge a little bit before, I gotta say, him, I was not the biggest fan of. I think Aldous Hodge is an actor who, he works with certain things. I think with other things he doesn't. I think he's a little bit of a TV actor, in the sense of where I don't know. I haven't seen him enough outside of Leverage to know how much range he has. And he kind of came off as a little stiff and a little one note here for me. I found that Pierce Brosnan's character, Dr. Fate character, was a lot more interesting. And I'm sorry, like the Atom Smasher character, that was just a character of, it's like literally the definition of, what are you doing here? Like, the dude could grow bigger than Giant Man, and somehow this guy is useless. About the only thing he does in the whole movie is just get in the way and like accidentally smash some cars. Like, just prove a living example as to like why the Justice Society shouldn't be there, And yeah, obviously the themes and the messaging, it was a little bit on the nose, I thought, but for the most part, I thought it worked overall. Again, kind of a generic villain, kind of a generic one-note villain. It was one of those things where the minute that I saw that this particular actor, the actor's name is Marwan Kenzari, and you guys may better know him as the actor who portrayed Jafar in Disney's live-action Aladdin movie from 2019. The minute that he shows up in this movie, it's another one of those guys where it's like, okay, bad guy, I know you're the bad guy, because you only ever play the bad guy, And it's like they try to make it some big mystery twist and surprise when it turns out that he's the villain, and then how he like concocts his evil plan in order to, get vaporized by the Rock, but make sure he's holding that weird crown that they find, so that way he can come back as this like like Trigon-esque devil villain in order to raise an army. It's a stupid villain plan. We're beyond.
In a way, it looks like Jafar in Aladdin.
It does, doesn't he? It kind of does.
It kind of looks, when he turns, it kind of looks like him, like the same kind. Again, they just like said, look, you still have the CGI they made you for Aladdin. We'll just change it a little bit, put a couple of horns on, and let's go. But it does look a little bit like the Jafar in the end of Aladdin, I
Oh
was
my
thinking.
god, it really does. It really fucking does. And like I said, it's stupid. It's corny. You know what it's gonna be. It leads to a big boss showdown. It's fine. The movie wraps up. Black Adam is here to stay. All that. I do still think that it's kind of annoying that it's like, okay, so he's not gonna fight Shazam first because Shazam was his villain, especially since I believe that Shazam is the next DC movie that's set to come out after this movie. It's set to come out, and
Mhm.
they pushed that, but that's coming out in March. So Shazam is the next movie, and it's like this is the one time where the constantly shuffling release it's actually worked out in their favor. Why would you want to have him not fight Shazam first rather than? And again, this is where spoilers come out. So again, for anybody who hasn't seen this, for that it hasn't been leaked online for millions of people, famously, since he was officially cast, The Rock has been saying that it is his goal to have a Black Adam versus Superman movie, building this up almost like a WWE event. And we all know how dirty Henry Cavill has been done by DC in these last couple of years, but we get that post-credit scene, and I famously said it, I'm like, this is the reason to watch the movie, because The Rock promised it, and we got it, because in the post-credit scene of this movie, we get Henry Cavill Superman that shows up and does the infamous again. It's like the Marvel movies of old with those post-credit scenes where we would get it and we were like, okay, how is this going to factor into the universe? And we would get a post-credit scene and the hero would and the other character from the other movie would show up and we as fans would cheer. It was such a classic old school moment, because at the end of the day, that like that little smile on the Rock's face is like, yeah, this shit is going to be cool, And I will say, for me, it worked because it's like I was talking with my friend the other day, and I think he had probably the best description of Henry Cavill ever, which is that they are constantly trying to cast Henry Cavill as this next big movie star, but he keeps getting done dirty because he is just he is one of the most attractive looking movie stars ever. I don't think once again, I think that's pretty objective to say, but he is constantly given these absolute shit scripts when really he is a gigantic nerd. He has famously said it. He is a big gamer. He loves all these DC properties. He wants to, give the best possible performance and give the best possible iterations of these characters the treatment that they deserve. I was watching an interview of him the other day where he was talking about like kind of the journey that Superman was going to go through in those first couple of early DC movies that we got, and it just feels like between that and The Witcher, he has just been given bad script after bad script after bad script, and then the studios go out of their way and punish him for it. Not even a year ago they said that Henry Cavill was done. We were never getting Henry Cavill back in the DC, and now he's officially back. And hopefully now we can hope that things will go well. Because if you ask me, I still think Henry Cavill is inspired casting as Superman. I rewatched Man of Steel. Man of Steel, I think it's a movie that was vastly misunderstood when it came out, and a lot of that I think gets attributed to Snyder. I think rather unfairly so. I still think that movie is really, really solid and probably the best, my favorite version of Superman that we've gotten. Again, I like the '78 Christopher Reeve movie, but there are just certain parts of that movie where I'm like, okay, it's
Yeah.
just it's a little bit corny, I think, just overall. But I still love Man of Steel. I'm glad that we got Cavill back. All like I said, it's not a big secret. It's not a big revelation. It was leaked it was leaked online for so many different people to see, So it's not like this is some big surprise, at least for me, It's not like people didn't think
Yeah.
this was going to happen. So yeah, I'm just happy as far as, like I said, that one scene alone to me just shows it's like, okay, we're on the right track. We're going in the right direction.
Yeah, it's funny when you say that one scene is the reason to watch the movie because I got a press screening to watch this movie earlier. And when we went, because it's a press screening, I don't know why the hell they do this. They did the same with Thor, Love and Thunder. They don't show the after credit scene to the
Right. Yeah.
press
I did know that.
because
Yeah.
of spoilers or shit like
Right.
that.
Right.
So I had to go then, pay for a ticket to just watch that scene in the end. Uh, so when you say it is the reason to go and get a ticket, well, I saw the movie. I still paid the ticket to watch that scene. So I completely agree with you. Regarding Henry Cavill, look, he's the perfect Superman. Like if Superman existed on planet Earth, it can only be him. He's perfect in every single way. Like you said, he's like gorgeous. He's like this big guy, muscly, but he still has something of that everyday man that Superman has. He's like someone that you could see being someone that cares and stuff. My problem is, I don't think when they said, "Oh, we're not getting another Henry Cavill," it's not because of him. I think everyone loves him. It's because superhero is a really hard character to make a movie that people care because unless you have kryptonite, there's no other way that that guy is ever in danger. And I think that is the big issue here. How you build a movie And I think that's why they bringing him back, because if you're a comic book nerd, you know that the only thing that can hurt Superman is kryptonite or magic. So when
Right.
you have a character that's built out of magic like Black Adam, I think that's the only character that can give him a fight. There's the only character that can make this interesting is if you bring Black Adam, and I think that's why the end game here. I don't think it's going to be the next one. I think he's going to fight Shazam first. I think
You
they
do
kind
think?
of
Okay.
making. I think they kind of trying to make this Superman thing like kind of a Thanos thing, that it's going to go for a couple of movies until they finally meet. I don't think they're going to go straight to that. But that, like, look, that is the way I would see it, them playing it smart. But because we got Batman v Superman so fast, I don't know. With DC, you never know. I just think if they are smart, they will play on this a little bit more. They will have a Superman movie, then they will have a Shazam, and maybe Black Adam gets involved, then whatever, until we get the big confrontation. That is how I think they should do it. I don't know how the new management is. If it was the old management, I completely agree with you. The next movie would be Superman v Black
The
Adam for
Black
sure.
Adam. Right. There would be no
Yeah,
build up, no anticipation
there will
for
be
it.
no build up for sure because they have no patience. I think this is the thing. They want to be Marvel, but they don't want to put the work that Marvel put in. They just want to go straight to what Marvel has now. And what Marvel has now, and when you said, oh, I think Marvel, everything they've been doing now is not that great, I would really disagree. I just think they are doing exactly what people ask. They are giving us completely different movies and different shows and stuff, and then some people connect with some people connect with others.
Right.
Look, I didn't
I
like She-Hulk, but I know a lot of people that love She-Hulk. I did not connect with
that is a
Moon
first for
Knight.
me. That is a
I
first for me. I
didn't.
have not heard a single person who likes She-Hulk.
I have a lot of people that I talk to, and they say, "Oh, it's a silly fun." Like I think, especially if you're not a big comic book fan or a big into the MCU, it's a fun thing to watch. Like it's okay. But for example, Moon Knight, I wasn't a big fan, but a lot of people loved it. I kind of enjoy what's it called, Hawkeye. I thought it was
Hawkeye was
fun.
fun. Hawkeye was
Yeah,
fun.
I thought it was fun. A lot of people didn't. And I think this is what we need to start understanding is not everything is going to be for everyone. And
Right.
then you watch it, you didn't like it, but look, it's not hurting anyone. This is what I get really upset when people start talking about, oh, they made this show. It's like they made this show and killed my family. No, look, don't
People
watch
got to
it.
stop with that.
Don't. Yeah, it's not like a big thing. Look, there's a lot of bigger things in the world to worry about than having, oh, this movie wasn't great. Like I loved Thor: Love and Thunder
Yeah.
because I really like that stupid comedy that like he does. It reminds me of the type of comedy that he did in What Lies in the Shadows.
Yes.
So not everyone was expecting that. They probably wanted a more serious movie, so people wouldn't like. But I think this is the thing. Like, I think they're gonna need some time to build up if they want to do that. If they want to do more individual things, I think he also works. I'm really excited to see the new Joker. That it's gonna be like a musical, and it's gonna have Lady Gaga and stuff. That's the kind of thing that also gets me excited. It's like these really weird projects. But if they want to do this, they have to have patience. And if they want to have patience, Superman can't be the next big thing because where do you go from there?
Right.
Where do
I
you go
agree.
from after having them fighting? What else can you do?
Well, so as of right now, well, and first off, in order to kind of address the whole Marvel thing of it all, my whole thing with Marvel and the kind of the reason why I'm going into it is because for me, it has nothing to do overall with like kind of the overall quality of each thing. For me, it's the biggest thing of it's like we went for Marvel from having like 2 to 3 blockbuster movies a year. So it still felt spread out and it felt like an event that was happening to now we get a TV show once every couple months. And so it doesn't feel as special. And because you could tell that like it feels like their resources are stretched pretty thin because of the new management over there, because of the new CEO, and that just the overall treatment. It just doesn't, you can just tell that the same treatment is not put into every thing that they put out now. And for me, it shows because there's some things that I like and that I more so gravitate towards, and there's something that I just can't connect with at all, you know? And it's just the fact that it's like, again, we're getting a new Marvel thing like every 2 to 3 months now, as opposed to again, 2 to 3 times a year, which is what we were getting before. And as far as kind of the future of DC goes, so as far as like what's next after this, so we have 3 movies coming out next year confirmed. We have Shazam: Fury of the Gods confirmed for March of next year. We have The Flash for July. That's kind of their big summer tentpole release. And we have Aquaman for Christmas of next year. We also know that we have the Blue Beetle movie, which was originally supposed to be an HBO Max drop that is now being revamped and reworked to go into theaters, starring the Hispanic kid from Cobra Kai, Zolo Mariduena, as Jaime Reyes Blue Beetle. That is also set to come out. There's no word yet on the Green Lantern Corps show that was supposed to go to HBO Max as well. We also know that certain of the HBO Max shows like Titans and Doom Patrol are coming to an end as well, as they're going to put more of a focus on theaters. As far as other movies that are coming out, we know for certain, obviously, the Joker 2 or Folie à la Deux, I believe is what it's called. The subtitle is confirmed for 2024, as well as more sequels to Matt Reeves' Batman, which is set to follow up the Penguin TV show that is set to come out next year. So that's what we have in store. We also know that James Gunn, in addition to working on Peacemaker 2, once he's done with the press tour for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, is also now working on a mysterious new DC project, as well as the fact that Man of Steel 2 has officially been greenlit as well. So we know we're getting all of those things, and I think that overall, I can say that the future, for now, for the first time in a long time, is actually positive for DC. So, Yolo, I wanted to thank you again for coming on and talking about
Thank
this with
you.
me today. It was an absolute blast. Before we get out of here, I wanted to hear your final thoughts and your star ratings out of 5 for Black Adam.
So it is a really fun movie. It is a movie that kind of brings back that joy of watching these big superhero blockbusters. I think it is a movie to watch in the cinema, in the biggest screen possible. Like if you get an IMAX, I think it's worth the extra money for that. The action scenes are amazing. There's some like great characters. I think The Rock really shows that he wanted to do this not for the money, but it's something that he really, really enjoys and that he's going to put all his heart in, especially for the future. So I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. My biggest issues was I thought it was a bit repetitive in some of the fight scenes, because a lot of the fight scenes involve them flying. So it is really hard to sometimes make the fight scenes look a little bit different, because it just feels the same. But the fight scenes that we got, they were really good. The characters that we got, like Hawkman and Dr. Fate, they really, really like bring something extra to the movie. And yes, the villain is generic, but I think he finishes strong. I love the last scene where he's sitting on the throne. That is a very iconic comic book image of Black Adam, that is sitting on the throne like he's the ruler over it all. And then there's a twist, like you'll see that that's not really what the movie went for. And I think it's just a fun movie to watch if you don't go there and just use your brain to pick on everything that's a little bit silly, because there are a lot of silly bits, a lot of bits, if you think about, do not work. But yeah, I give it a 3.5 out of 5. And I think for a movie like this, that's a good rating, because it is. If you put it in terms of fun, I'll probably give it a 4.5 in terms of being fun and just having a blast with it. But in terms of a movie, there's some flaws. That's why it goes a bit down.
I couldn't agree more. That's exactly the same rating. I gave it 3.5 out of 5. Like I said, it's a fun, dumb movie you can turn your brain off to. I had a couple of problems with it. Like I said, certain of the stiff acting, like you said, some of the repetitive action sequences. I also wasn't a big fan of the editing. I thought the editing was really, really choppy throughout. But again, it's a fun movie. You go, you have a blast with it. It's worth seeing on the big screen. They deliver on the action. It doesn't have any of the old problems that we know DC for. And that's really all I can say about it. Like I said, it's not amazing. I wouldn't watch it again, but it does exactly what it needs to do, which again, in today's modern day and age of just oversaturation of everything and just struggling to get any good movies, I say yes, we need more. We need more movies like Black Adam. And I never thought I would hear myself say that. So for myself, Yolo, thank you once again. Again, we haven't heard from you. We haven't had you on the channel in a minute, but I'm hoping that this will not be the case going forward. I'm hoping that we can have you on the channel much more going forward.
Anytime.
Where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
So you can follow us on Unyolo Movies blog on Instagram. That's mainly where we at, and you can go there and check our reviews and ratings and the lists that we do. And some of Little J, that's my daughter, that does this blog with me when she goes to the cinema. She does a couple of cool videos, so just check it out there.
Absolutely. Of course, you can follow me at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms. Be sure to follow the official Talking TV podcast on Instagram and across all social media platforms. TikTok, especially. Like I said, I've got my top 10 favorite horror movies of all time that I'm doing now in order to build up to the spooky day itself, Halloween, along with clips of all of our most recent podcast episodes. Be sure to go back and listen to all of our Talking Thrones episodes. I might also throw up a reaction to House of the Dragon. Wink, wink, nod, nod. If you guys,
We
if
follow
you
on
guys,
TikTok. We follow on
exactly.
TikTok. You do great. So
Oh,
follow him on TikTok. It's
thank you,
fun.
man, thank you. That means a lot. It really does. Of course, follow us with all the stuff there. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on Twitch if you're not already. New episodes are uploaded on Spotify and Apple Podcasts every single Monday, so be sure to listen to us there. And as always, people, you know what I'm going to say: 12 seasons in a short film, and watch more fucking movies. We'll see you guys next time.